In part 1 of this garden pavilion build, we got the posts up and the side girts installed. The next step is to cut the upper beams to length and mark their crown. I mark all 4 sides with a square, make 4 cuts, then finish off the middle with a handsaw. The ends have a quarter ellipse cut into them. I laid out and cut a pattern from plywood according to the drawings. These curves are then traced on the ends of the beams. I'll lay out and cut the shallow groove where it sits on the top of the post. I like this look, and you may have seen me do this on other projects. I think it's worth the extra time and effort. As with all the grooves or laps on this build, I make a series of close parallel cuts with a circular saw set to depth, then break these off with a hammer or wooden mallet, then clean up the groove with a chisel. Now to cut these quarter ellipse end profiles. For this, I use a jigsaw with a long blade. I cut these from the end inward. With a handsaw, I make a shallow straight square cut in the end of the beam first. This helps to start the blade squarely and improves the accuracy of the cut. During this hot and dry summer, there were forest fires burning throughout the west. The smoke in the air on a few of these days made it look like sunset all day long. I decided to leave the footage as the camera saw it and to not color correct it. I burnt the wood on these cuts by turning a bit too sharply at the end of the curve. I sanded the char marks off afterward. I did a full review of this jigsaw. See the video from the link in the description below. I'll attach the beam to the top of the post with a long lag bolt. I countersink the head and washer with a Forstner bit, then drill a pilot hole, then finish with a bit slightly smaller than the diameter of the lag bolt shank. The beams are then chamfered too. You can see the bow in these beams that I oriented up as the crown. I use a grinder with sanding disc to chamfer the curves and tighter corners. I enlisted the help of my neighbor Calvin to set these beams on the top of the posts.
I'll go up a couple steps.
Yeah. Okay, so I could probably just...
You can probably just lift it in place.
This went well and they fit the first time.
Like that.
You need a little more over there right now?
What's that?
You need a little more over there?
Just give me 1 second to see if I can just get it up and on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going all the way up.
Let's go all the way up. See.
Yep.
You get yours in first there?
Yeah, right then.
Fantastic, man. Perfect. Yeah, I'll do a little fine tuning.
Yeah.
I drill into the post with a long bit and run in the lag bolt with a socket wrench. I made most of the braces for this pavilion and my woodshed project at the same time. If you saw the woodshed build series, then you might recognize some of this footage. But I'll quickly go through the steps again for this project. I made the braces using 2x8 red cedar. I laid out and cut a plywood pattern according to the plans. I traced the pattern, then cut opposing 45-degree angles on the miter saw. This ensures the brace will be 90 degrees. I cut the curved sections on the bandsaw. I sand this cut smooth with a small hobby belt sander. The flexible sanding belt follows the curve of the brace quite well. The braces will be attached to the posts and beams with a long lag bolt at a 20-degree angle to help pull the brace tightly into the corner. I tilt the table of my drill press to this angle, mark the hole center, and clamp some simple stops to the table to hold the pieces in place. A countersink with a Forstner bit drops the head of the bolt neatly below the surface. Then I switch bits to drill the pilot hole for the shank of the lag bolt. Using my angle grinder with a sanding disc, I bevel the edges of each corner brace, except the edge that mates with a post, girt, or beam. So all the outside edges. I mark the post and beam 2 inches in from the outside edge to guide the brace location. I apply some exterior wood glue, then hold it securely in place. Then drill into the post and beam and drive in a lag bolt with an impact driver. Then hand tighten with a socket wrench to prevent thread ripout. For this size structure, I think this simple brace is more than enough to give the structure rigidity. A brace with a proper tendon that is mortised into the post and the beam is always the best option, but for this project I think a flat-mounted brace with a long angled lag bolt is enough. On the plans I've included a slightly larger brace for the inside corners as an alternative. The braces that mate with the girts are installed flush with the outer face of the post, as the girts are the same thickness as the braces. As another option, I've included another brace variation in the plans that allows for a flush mount onto the inside of the girt or front roof beam. This design matches the look of the other braces from the outside. The front roof beams are made from 2x8 stock. A similar ellipse profile is cut in the ends as in the upper beams. And the beam that mounts on the front post has a small groove cut to make clearance for the girt. These are also chamfered with a power plane and angle grinder. First, I attach the beam to the front posts with construction adhesive and lag bolts. To help attach the lower front beam, I screwed on some temporary boards to the bottom edge of the girts. This allows me to rest this beam on these supports while I drill and run in lag bolts. In addition to these lag bolts, I add a galvanized corner brace to the inside of the lower front roof beam where it meets the girt. The 12 best fir 2x8s for the rafters are pulled from the pile. These are inspected, marked for their crown, then cut to length. The ellipse profile is copied onto the ends and cut with the jigsaw. They are stained and let dry overnight. I also applied a coat of stain on the pavilion frame the same day. It's easier to do now than after the rafters go up. Each rafter is hauled up and positioned across the top beams. The bird's mouth are marked and then it's taken down to the sawhorses. They are cut with a circular saw, then finished with the jigsaw. To start, I clamp some blocks to the ends of the top beams. I have some wooden homemade scaffolding and planks to stand on, so I set those up before I start working on the rafters. I haul up the first rafter and clamp it to the block to hold it. On the rafter, I pre-mark the point where it will contact the upper beam. At this mark, I cut a small saw curve to help hold it in place while I mark the bird's mouth. I take the rafter down to the sawhorses and cut the bird's mouth. Then permanently attach the blocks to the beams. Rafters are hauled back up and screwed to the beams. Support blocks are added to each beam as the rafters are installed. I'll be using this blocking along with short pipe clamps to straighten each rafter as I go along. I put the straightest rafters on the outside edges of the pavilion and the most twisted ones on the inside. This third rafter on the east side was twisted and bowed, but not so bad that I couldn't use it. So this process was repeated for each of the 12 rafters. It took the better part of a day, but it went well. Full dimension 2x8 fir is heavy, so I slept well that night. This rafter had the most twist, maybe more than 10 degrees or so, but the pipe clamp worked like a charm to straighten it. I had a few outside braces left to put on, so I did that next. I used construction adhesive even though I had already stained these frames. I did a test ahead of time, and the construction adhesive stuck to wood that had been stained without any problem. Thank you for watching part 2 of this pavilion build. If you like what you see on our channel, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. We'll see you next time.